Australia's business channel. This is Mediaweek.
Hello and welcome to the program. Ahead, 10 talks up its turnaround strategy while 9 sells its one-stop shop to buyers. Foxtel takes Express to the US to the next level, signing a new HBO deal. And why the Fairfax CEO thought that a breakup of the publisher wasn't a good idea. But first to 10, which after unveiling a full-year loss of nearly $13 million last week amid declining revenue and poor ratings, is hoping that Australian drama and more food shows can help turn around its fortunes next year. Well, our co-host James Manning, the editor and publisher of Mediaweek, is here to tell us more. 10 unveiling its big programs for 2013, says it's going to be more competitive. Do they have the programs to do it?
Yeah, look, I think they do. They've kept the right things, they've got rid of the right things, and they've got a suite of new programs which should do well. Things like MasterChef The Professionals. They've just announced today that they've already signed on Coles as a sponsor to that, so that looks pretty good. Batavia, a big drama show, 8 weeks of that should do pretty well, and they've addressed their early evening where they needed to improve. The Simpsons and then the project moving to 6:30 should give them a bit better build into the evening.
Now, and you talk about this in one of the interviews coming up, but the fact that 10 obviously has their own production or development department, they've obviously got a lot of production houses providing programming for them, but they're not making anything themselves just yet.
No, they've always been the sort of home for independents and not making their own shows, so they've got a lot of people bringing them programs, which helps to get them some good properties, but they want to develop some of their own stuff, and we've been promised we'll see a bit more of that in 2013.
And just on the news review there, any update yet on what's going to happen with the programming, with staff levels, that sort of thing? Was there any mentions?
Because it was only launched actually a week ago, so they're still doing that review, but they're committed so far to staying with breakfast and staying with their late news programs, which are probably two fringe areas they might look at jettisoning, getting rid of, to get their staff numbers down.
Now, you spoke to the new Chief Programming Officer for 10, Beverly McGarvey, being promoted after the departure, of course, of David Mott. She was acting in the role anyway. Here's a little of what James had to say and what Beverly had to say in that interview.
Now, we had a bit of talk in there about a 40-week schedule.
Yes.
Now, we presume you're not going to jump early this year because you did sort of lead everybody by a couple of weeks last year.
Yeah, I think we always aim to start very hard and make sure that our audience know where our shows are at the top of the year. So we will be going hard at the top of the year, but we're not going to make any announcements about our actual launch dates until a bit later in the year.
Okay, so that 40 weeks could be slightly 41, 42.
At least 40 weeks.
At least 40 weeks. A lot of Australian series, Australian drama,
yes,
and some more food. So those sort of subjects resonate with your audience?
Yeah, the Australian drama slate is something that's worked really well for us this year. Offspring, Puberty Blues, Bikies, The Assange, they've all done very well, and we want to make sure that we can continue that momentum and really diversify the slate. So obviously we announced a couple of shows. We have another series, a new series called Wonderland, which is in the Offspring space, romantic comedy, but with a male lead and from a male point of view, to offer an alternative to Nina's point of view in Offspring. We announced also The Track, which is really exciting. It's a crime thriller, and again something that we haven't really done for a while because it's a thriller genre. Mr. and Mrs. Murder looks like a crime series, but really it's character drama. It's a vehicle for Sean and Kat, and they have a great relationship on screen, and I think that's really interesting because it's quirky and it feels very different and fresh for Australian television. And also obviously Batavia, huge event, very different to the other stuff we've talked about. So that whole drama slate is something that we're very excited about.
Now, the production sector will be happy because there's a good spread of commissions across a broad range of companies.
Yes.
You started your own development department, but
yes,
nothing up from them yet for prime time?
Well, as you know, anything that goes through development takes a bit of time, and that team are working on lots of projects for 2013, and some of them will air in 2013.
Okay, so we might see a mid-year upfront perhaps with some new shows?
We'll definitely have more new shows.
Local versus overseas programs.
Yes.
Is it harder to get away a US series these days?
I think it's not harder, but the quality has to be right. Australian audiences are very particular about what they watch, and they expect to see premium content. So I think that's the key for us, is to offer the sort of top of the crop from the US series. And I think what we have shown with The Americans, which is tonally very like Homeland, Ripper Street from the BBC, and obviously Elementary from CBS, are all really high quality overseas series. So that's important.
I don't think it's out of order to suggest you'd like a bit more punch from your early evening after 6 o'clock, so you might be getting that with The Simpsons. The project moves again, but at least it's in 2 time slots now where it has performed well in the past.
Absolutely. The project performs very well between 6:30 and 7. It does better in that half hour than it does obviously in its first half hour. It has a track record at 7 o'clock and has performed incredibly well in that slot. So that hour between 6:30 and 7:30 is really important to us. It's a foundation for the rest of the schedule, and it will provide that opportunity for our audience to see promos, to see cross-promotion, and it's very in keeping with our brand, as is The Simpsons. It will bring younger viewers to the channel and will allow us to communicate with those younger viewers about the rest of the schedule.
Both you and your Chief Executive, James Warburton, talked about committing to time slots, committing to the schedule, won't be moving stuff around. In the unthinkable that a couple of these shows don't take off as much as you'd want to, does that mean you've got to stick with them rather than replacing them with something else?
I think the most important thing is that we have a consistent schedule, and it is absolutely our intention to maintain a consistent schedule. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. If the occasional show completely underperforms and our audience just don't respond to it and don't want to see it, then we'll obviously have to take some sort of reaction to that. But our intention is to launch a schedule and maintain it and to stick with it, which we have done in the past. We're known for launching shows like The Project and sticking with them and giving them time to grow. So I think it's important to know when something can build and to know when it's just not going to happen. But next year we will be consistent.
Now, James, is there any target for 10 in terms of market share for ad revenue next year?
No, look, they've been down around 25%, 7's on 40, 9's on about 35. They'd like to get it closer to 30%. We asked they sort of making any predictions about ratings improvements or anything, and Beverly said, look, we don't have crystal balls, programmers are never going to give you an answer like that, and there was no sort of clarity on that, and probably nor should there be from the advertising people at this stage.
All right, and of course important to get the TV critics' point of view. The networks obviously need to win them over, and you actually chatted to the Sydney Morning Herald TV writer, Michael Adato.
Michael Adato, 10's needed a bit of power earlier in the evening for a while. 6 p.m. probably hasn't been one of their greatest slots. Can we expect that with The Simpsons might give them a lift?
Look, I think bringing anything to that slot that is an alternative is a smart move. And I think, even in symbolic terms, kind of reconnecting 10 to its core traditions, to those notions that remind us that 10 is now what it was then or what it was when it was at its greatest, is probably a very smart move. I think it's reassuring for an audience, and I think also if you are interested in providing a genuinely legitimate alternative, it's probably not a bad idea. I think one of Australian television's great structural weaknesses is that there's so much on in every time slot that's identical to everything else in the time slot. We have commercial broadcasters who duplicate rather than compete. I think anything that breaks that open is smart.
Lots of new Australian series, a couple of cooking programs. Seems to be probably playing it safe, which is possibly a smart move.
Look, I think so, and I think also emphasising Australian content. I mean, the reality is in the last 5 or 10 years, the value, the commercial value of American or imported content has diminished greatly. I think, so emphasising Australian content is smart. Australian programs dominate, the most watched programs on television. So I think anything that taps into that is a good move. I think Wonderland's a smart idea. It's an Australian drama with a female focus. It's a romantic comedy drama, and I think what we're seeing 10 do there is see what it has in terms of strong assets like Offspring and building on those by bringing in new programs that kind of tap existing audiences, which is a great way to program a network. I think you have to it's the great mistake of a lot of networks that I think they begin programming a network in far-flung corners of the world and in sort of formats from Holland and Finland, and in actual fact if you actually begin on the table with a focus on who's actually already watching the network, I think very smart move.
And James, just to something else as well, the sale of the outdoor division that 10 has, iCorp as well, it's back on. Well, certainly we're still waiting to hear from 10 whether they'll accept this lower price from the private equity group Champ. Yeah, I think they'll. We still think Champ's probably the only buyer out there, so 10 will be negotiating pretty hard. They've made what 10 will be hoping is a lowball offer, and with a bit of luck they might meet somewhere in the middle from the original offer. Now, the 10 event wasn't the only one this week. There was also the 9 event, Powered. Just tell us a bit about that. It was, and they were sort of at pains to point out, look, this isn't that 9's big upfront. That's to come later this month, and we'll cover that towards the end of November. But this is sort of talks about the integration opportunities for advertisers.
embedding their products into Nine's programming. Things like The Voice, Ford was a big player there. The Block has lots of opportunities there. We heard a little bit about what's happening there.
Yeah, you spoke to Peter Wiltshire, of course, the Group Sales and Marketing Director of Nine Entertainment.
Peter Wiltshire, now explain to us what we're doing today. You're showcasing some of your integration opportunities and your group opportunities.
Correct. This is very much about the way that we are going to interact with clients and agencies in the future, and about the connections we can create for brands with our consumers through our media.
You were quite relieved. You said at the start that the last week's sort of deal that was sorted out, the debt pile is gone, as it were. Was that sort of, how was that impacting on sales teams?
I think it was more just the noise that they were putting up with in the marketplace. I mean, you couldn't turn left or right, up or down without having someone ask a question or read an article that was, purveying some dark future for us. At the end of the day, the problem would be resolved at some point. It was resolved rapidly last week, and the outcome could not be better for us. So I think just generally, human sentiment is better.
Was it giving you sort of a competitors any sort of short-term advantages?
Oh, I'm sure they thought it was. I'm sure they did their best to create most of it, but no, I don't think so. I think the record's there in writing. I mean, the numbers have been good for us so far this year from a ratings point of view. Our revenue's building as well, and I think that if that had have gone on, I think for perhaps through the Christmas season, it would have been difficult for us next year. But it is resolved, it's behind us, and we've got the best outcome we could possibly hope for.
Yeah, so you jumped pretty quickly. I think it was almost the same day you sent out the invites to this event. So you'd obviously been waiting for the moment to get out there and.
No, believe it or not, James, they weren't connected. This event today was actually created sort of 5 or 6 weeks ago, and we always do our go-to-market upfront real presentation in the last week of November. So the invitations for that actually went out on Friday. So that timing was not planned. It just happened to be at the same week.
It was interesting hearing you talk about how the industry's changed really these last few years, the opportunities available to advertisers, the integration. You had Michael Healy and Andrew Backwell in there. You're saying, look, a few years ago, these guys wouldn't have been doing what they can offer you today. And that amazing stat, I think 2,500 hours in total of sort of integration opportunities.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, that's the way that the networks embraced the need that advertisers have to build their better connections with their consumers through our content. We've all had to realise that you've got to go beyond the ad break, and the ad break is important, it's critical, but it's not going to be the ultimate solution for the future. And when you can do things so naturally within the content and have the content still perform and rate so consumers aren't put off by the work you're doing, then that's got to be the ultimate circle coming together for us in terms of all parties aligning on great content, great brands integrating with it in a seamless and natural fashion that doesn't put consumers off.
You've pushed this pretty hard since you've arrived at Nine. We saw an example today of The Voice, and Ford actually sold quite a few motor cars, I think, off the opportunity they took. The Block has probably been your longest term success, would that be right?
That'd be right in terms of integration. I mean, the Block was probably setting new standards for integration back in 2003. Some would argue in 2004 we actually pushed it a little bit too far. But it had its hiatus period and came back to where it was immediately snapped up. And, that show, consumers now are aware that brands are living inside programs and that they're using the IP leverage of that. And, I find it that you can actually watch an ad break and see the program coming to life in the ad break, which is actually the purpose you're there for anyway. You don't tune to a TV show for an ad break, you tune for the TV show. So if that brand, that program comes to life in the ad break with advertisers, then a consumer's going to find that experience a lot more natural.
What about integration opportunities? Are we seeing the shares for the digital channels continually creep higher? Go's had a few good weeks recently.
Mm-hmm.
Are there going to be sort of programming things there happening?
No, I think we're sort of seeing the new channels really come into their maturity now. I mean, we're only 1 year away from digital switch off. So our penetration in Australia of digital television is up plus 90% from households' point of view, and I think sets in use now in digital is in the 70s. So we're very close to saturation, and those channels are now finding their feet from all the networks' offerings. And I think now what you're seeing is a renewed investment back into the primary channel, because we all know that the primary channel is the mothership. It's the thing that people are going to go to first, and they'll go to our other channels on a secondary nature. So, it is all about the main channel for us, and those second channels aren't devalued, but they're there to play a role in terms of providing alternatives to the main channel.
Great interviews there, and coming up on Media Week, we'll also get the media buyer's view on the 10 and 9 events. We'll also be finding out why the Fairfax CEO didn't think a breakup of the company was a good idea.